Good evening, fantasy people, Dynasty Land. Welcome back to another episode of Market Watch Mondays. Recording this Sunday night. Just finished watching Championship Weekend. Had a couple of great matchups. First between two all-time greats, Tom Brady, the GOAT, versus Aaron Rodgers, probably one of the most talented throwers of the ball we've ever seen. It was quite a game. I mean, it looked like the Bucs were basically going to blow them out early on, and then Tom Brady went out there and threw like 3 picks. Not great in the second half. But unfortunately, I guess fortunately for Brady, the Packers were not able to convert on any of those into points, whereas in the one turnover that Rodgers did have, the one fumble that Aaron Jones did have, I believe the Bucs converted into points. But all in all, it was a great match. It was a good showing by the Bucs defense. Good showing by Brady for the first half, and then towards the end of the game where, you had to make a couple throws to kind of run out the clock. There was a big pass interference call against, I think it was whoever was defending Tyler Johnson, which was actually like a legit call because you could see him holding the jersey. Whether or not the ball is catchable, I don't know. It's subjective. But end of the day, Brady won. I think it's just a pretty incredible feat to kind of just go from the Patriots dynasty, move immediately to the Bucs, and in their first year, go to the Super Bowl. I think that's a pretty incredible story. I saw a crazy stat. I don't remember where I saw it on Twitter, so sorry, I won't give you credit. But if I find it later, I'll throw it in the links. But I think Brady has been in like 10 of the last 21 Super Bowls or something like that. Something absurd like that. So, and like Steph Curry hits like 43% of his 3-point shots, and which means that basically Brady has had a better shot of making the Super Bowl compared to Steph Curry, who is Mr. Automatic from beyond the arc. So, look, it's been an incredible ride to kind of watch Brady go. I mean, everyone kind of wrote him off, thought he was washed, couldn't throw deep anymore. Obviously, I was actually pretty high on him because he came into, I think, arguably one of the best supporting casts that he's had. And out of I guess the last few years, right? I mean, this is definitely one of the better weapons that he's had. So I think that you cannot undersell this. And then people want to make excuses for why he did it. It's because he had good offense. He had a good defense, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. But at the end of the day, if a guy goes from one of the most winningest franchises of all time and then goes and leaves and that franchise doesn't even make the playoffs, and he joins a completely new franchise which couldn't make the playoffs and takes him to the Super Bowl, I think, there's a common denominator factor. Now, does he get help? Of course he does. It's a team game. It's a football game. Nobody gets there alone. So to kind of just discount him because he's had help is kind of foolish because, the guys that don't get help, no one makes it. So at some point, everyone needs help to get there. He has a good team. The defense, stepped up when it mattered, put pressure on Rodgers, and, defended the red zone pretty damn well against Devontae Adams, who's been borderline unstoppable all season. So anyways, it was a great matchup. I enjoyed the game a ton. Now it's just basically the next game after that. We had, Patrick Mahomes versus the Bills. A lot of people were on Team Bills Mafia because this is a team that, came out of nowhere really and was lighting the league, setting the league on fire with Josh Allen playing at an MVP level. And, they never had a chance, man. Aside from that early fumble by McCole Hardman and recovery, their offense their offense never got it going. They kicked 5 field goals. And if you're going against one of the best offenses of all time, led by one of the best quarterbacks of all time, and the only one in my eyes has the potential to overtake Tom Brady as the future GOAT, should he gather all those accomplishments, you cannot trade field goals for touchdowns. It just doesn't work, and you're going to lose 9 times out of 10, and this is one of those 9 times. So it was never close, but congrats to the Bills. They have a bright future, young quarterback. Obviously, there's some glaring weaknesses on defense. Also, their run game stinks. Singletary, not it. Zach Moss, maybe he's it. Hasn't really been given a fair shot yet, I guess, but I wouldn't really be counting on it. I wasn't a big fan of either of them and won't be a big fan going forward. Will not be surprised if they go and sign someone via free agency or just draft someone else in this class, and we'll see what happens. But run game, definitely a weakness. They cannot lean on it at all, and defense obviously has some holes, so it puts a lot of pressure on your team. But overall, pretty good games, and it's setting us up for a current GOAT versus potential future GOAT rematch between Tom Brady, the current GOAT, obviously, against Patrick Mahomes, who, probably the most talented quarterback we've ever seen. And if he keeps stringing together these types of accomplishments, he could overtake Tom Brady's GOAT, man. And that's a very well within reason. Until he does it, Brady's still the GOAT. But, I mean, everyone with eyes can realize how talented Patrick Mahomes is, and he's by far and away clearly the best player in the league. Like, some of the stuff that he was doing today was just absolutely absurd. There's like a blitzer that got free release, no blocker, and Mahomes still somehow found a completion to, I believe, Travis Kelce, who was literally unguardable today, or just not unguardable, just wasn't guarded. I mean, the Bills basically said, okay, well, take Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce and beat us, and that's exactly what they did, because you leave Travis Kelce underneath, and he's going to beat you and pretty much beat anyone there. So he was an absolute monster. Probably a first-round redraft pick next year. Going to be, on a lot of championship rosters again, I'm assuming next year. I know I'm in a couple tight end premiums leagues with Travis Kelce, and it's an absolute luxury. So can't wait to put him in my lineups again. Cannot wait. But today, got some topics to go over. So we'll kind of jump into it. I'm going to talk about some stuff I talked about on Twitter, and also just get into a combined ranking for the rookie class and get a little bit deep on that. But before we get to it, y'all know what time it is. Hit that intro. All right, so if you've been paying attention, rookie mocks. It's rookie season. People are doing mock drafts. I don't really bother with that too much. I'm right now. I'm focused on building on my own ranks. I'm still trying to think about how I value the rookie wide receivers to the rookie wide receivers to the next year. They will be sophomore wide receivers in like the Justin Jefferson, the 2020 class, and how I value them respectively. Kind of like how I put out the running backs and the quarterback so far. There will be an episode like that for wide receivers. I'm just not ready yet. I'm still working through my wide receivers. But I do have the wide receivers within season rookies ranks for now. So I'm going to go over a combined class, super flex format, quarterback, super flex for quarterback, running back, tight end, and wide receiver combined for the first 2 rounds, and break down that a little bit. But before I do, the first thing I want to cover is, I mentioned this on Twitter this week, and you'll see it here. I basically tweeted something along the lines of, understanding where the teardrops come in rookie drafts is like so critical. I think, people don't really fully grasp this, right? Because they'll be like, oh, well, I'm only moving back 1 spot. I'm only moving back 2 spots. But like that 1 or 2 spots within the rookie draft can have like a multi-round value gap when it comes to the startup draft. That's why it's so important to understand tiers. Like if you think about it, right? Last year, what happened? Like CEH and Jonathan Taylor by the end of this draft season, like by August, they were like first round startup picks in superflex formats. First round, maybe latest, like early second round, right? That was the like basically the latest that I saw either of them go, right? And then you had like the DeAndre Swifts and stuff going in like the 3rd round, late second, like all those rookie running backs basically, right? And then, so if you think about it, last year you had like Joe Burrow, Tua Tagovailoa, right? Who were basically going in the 3rd round, right? And to me, that was like 1.03, 1.04, and 1.01, 1.02, which was CH and Jonathan Taylor were first-round starter picks. So basically, you're dropping 2 rounds of value in a startup pick. So to me, in a startup pick, you should be willing to pay a future first easily to move up those 2 spots, right? But very few people are willing to do that in a rookie draft. And people often trade back in a rookie draft from like 1.01 to 1.04 for less than that. So that's like kind of like the I would call it like disconnected arbitrage that you see, similar just like rookie draft values and startup draft values in total. But like, I think psychologically people are unable to overcome the mental barrier of like paying a first round pick just to move up a couple slots. For me, that's no problem. If I see someone there that I think is a big teardrop, I'll pay up that first and move up those couple slots because I think it's worth it. I think about it in terms of startup value, right? Like how much value am I getting on that front? And another example would be like if you kept going down that list, right? Like Joe Burrow, Tua Tagovailoa, and then you had like DeAndre Swift, Jacob Dobbins, and like Cam Akers, right? Like a lot of those guys, 2nd, 3rd round picks in your startup drafts. And then the first wide receiver off the board was CeeDee Lamb, right? So if you think about Jonathan Taylor to CeeDee Lamb, a lot of people would be like, well, these are the same tier of rookies for me. I would have, because CeeDee Lamb is a tier 1 wide receiver, and Jonathan Taylor was a tier 1 running back. I have them in the same tier, so I'm indifferent to them. Well, you shouldn't be indifferent because Jonathan Taylor was the first round starter pick, and CeeDee Lamb was probably earliest going in like the 4th round, right? And sometimes even the 5th round of Superflex drafts is where I would see him go. So that's a full 3 to 4 rounds of value difference, and arguably worth more than just a single future first to move up that much, right? So you shouldn't think about it in terms of that way. Like I don't view it as like, hey, here's my tier 1 wide receiver, here's my tier 1 running back. I'm indifferent between who I would get between them. I view it as more like, these are the certain guys that I would be indifferent in terms of drafting when it comes to like value, right? So last year, for example, like CeeDee Lamb was a tier 1 wide receiver for me, but he's not a tier 1 asset for me in rookie drafts. The only tier 1 assets I had were Jonathan Taylor and CEH and Joe Burrow, I think, right? So that's like the different way to view things, and that's why I want you guys to really understand that. Like when you're on the draft and you're on the clock, don't be like, oh, I'm only moving back one spot. Really understand where you guys have your tiers. Now I'll show you what I think about where I think the tier should go from my perspective, but it doesn't mean that you have to follow my tiers exactly. I think for yourselves, not everyone has to like follow exactly what I do. I'm just trying to show you how I think about it, and the best way to do that is to illustrate with an example of how I do think about it. So, that's the thing I want to cover, and I think this is a really important topic. I want people to grasp it because I feel like it's a really big gap in rookie drafts, and it's something you can fully take advantage of from both directions. It's easiest to take advantage of to trading back within tiers and then landing a guy that you're indifferent about later on and adding like future seconds and future first round picks. That's easy, but also like you can be aggressive, right? Like understand where to be aggressive. And if people are valuing it 1 or 2 spot move as like not as much as they should, then you should absolutely jump on that, right? And jump on that and move up and get your guy. So without further ado here, let's kind of jump into the first round of my rookie draft. And, this is fluid, right? Things will move. You'll notice some differences between this time and the last time I've shown something, and it's because I've moved a lot in my rankings in terms of where I think. I've talked to more people. I've started incorporating more of the film aspect and also other aspects that I study for some of these prospects into my process. So that's why you'll see these rankings kind of move. And also keep in mind, this is because it's before the NFL draft, right? So we don't know exactly where a lot of these rookies are going to land yet. So, when that happens, I'm typically trying to lean on the safer side with guys that I know or I'm very, very confident that will get the draft capital and are more landing spot independent, right? So kick it off. I think a lot of people will have multiple players in this tier. I have one guy, and that's it. It's Trevor Lawrence. And, you guys know I'm a big Justin Fields supporter. I'm a big Justin Fields fan. But again, thinking about that concept, going back to the startup draft value, Trevor Lawrence is going to be the only one out of this entire class that's going to command a first-round startup pick. And I tweeted this months ago, and I tweeted it a couple weeks ago again. And I said, look, by come August, the norm in Superflex startup drafts, Trevor Lawrence will be a first-round startup pick, probably in that 1.07 to 1.09 range, like that middle back part of the first round. That's where I would expect Trevor Lawrence to start going. And, I know I got a bunch of people on Twitter being like, oh, he's already there, like trying to be like smart asses or whatever. But you got to recognize, like, not everyone plays with a bunch of nerds on Twitter. Not everyone's like us, just a bunch of degenerates on Twitter talking and thinking about this shit like 24/7, right? A lot of people just play in normal leagues and have like normal lives and, aren't super nerds. So what I mean is, like, I think across the board, once it normalizes, you're going to see ADP, so average draft position of Trevor Lawrence in that first round. So, and I don't think Justin Fields is going to be there. Like, they're not going to go back to back. They might not even go anywhere close to each other, right? They might go a full round apart. And Najee Harris definitely won't be there. Jamar Chase definitely won't be there. He's a wide receiver. No chance. So that's why I think it's a full tier drop. So if you have the 1.01, a lot of people will be like, oh, well, you should just, take the 1.01 and, flip it for like 1.04 and like a second round pick. Don't do that. Don't do that now because you're giving up value. And the drop from Trevor Lawrence to the next best guys is actually pretty wide, right? And I like Justin Fields, right? But there's no reason for you to give up that value gap because I guarantee you there's multiple people that will value Trevor Lawrence like he is football Jesus, exactly like how he looks. So you got to pay attention to the values as well as like what you prefer in terms of your own personal rank. So if you have the 1.01, I think that's his own tier. I think it's a big drop from that to the next. Even though you might not view the production as such, I'm trying to project values, and I think the value drop will 100% be there. So if you're giving up the 1.01, you better get something good in return. And dropping from the 1.01 to like a mid first plus like a future first, you don't have to do it right now. Like wait until the draft because that deal will always be there. I always say, like, if you're trying to trade back, there's really no need to trade back this early in the offseason. Right, that deal will always be there because someone will move up after the NFL draft, after the hype cycle has really started. We haven't even had the first hype cycle yet. The first hype cycle is the combine, and we won't have a full version of the combine this year, so that'll be a little bit muted. But the main hype cycle is going to be the NFL draft when the Mel Kipers, the Daniel Jeremiahs, everyone starts talking about Trevor Lawrence, and they start making the Hall of Famer comps. Like, this is the best prospect since Andrew Luck, the best prospect since Eli Manning, the best prospect since John Elway, the best prospect since blah, 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 the next Patrick Mahomes. You're going to hear it over and over again, and the value of that pick will just keep rising and rising and rising. So do not dump that pick too early, all right? So next, we got a group, and I got three. This is where, people always ask me, do you draft for talent or do you draft for need? And, a lot of people are like, oh, you always draft BPA. You always draft BPA. Like, no, I think that's stupid, right? Because at some point you got to consider needs for your team. But the only time I don't consider it is, one, if I'm rebuilding. I don't care about team needs. I only care about value. I've said that again and again. Or the other time that I don't do it is, that is the only time. I'm rebuilding and I don't care about the value, right? That's when you don't care, and you always draft VPA. But I do consider need when I think players are close, right? If players are within a tier, like I have them here, and you'll notice I have 3 different positions in this tier, that's when like need will come into play. Hey, if I'm sitting there and I have a bunch of quarterbacks, and I'm gonna contend, and I think I need a running back, I'll be okay with firing on a Najee Harris right here, right? More often than not, though, I'm going to give preference to Justin Fields because his value is more insulated. I think he's going to get the draft capital. Although I've seen some mock drafts of him being like QB4 off the board. If that happens, I may need to reassess. We'll see what happens because, at the end of the day, draft capital is king. So we'll see where stuff lands. But to me, Justin Fields is the second best prospect in this class, and he is in a tier of his own in terms of quarterbacks. And, he's been fantastic. I understand the weaknesses. He's like, slow to get off his reads or whatever. I feel like these are things that can be developed. But again, I'm not a QB whisperer. I'm not a QB evaluator. I'm going to let draft capital do most talking for me here. But then you got Najee Harris, Jamar Chase. And this goes back to the point about security and safety, right? Like I really think that Najee Harris is going to get the draft capital. So that's one. And I think he's the most landing spot independent running back in this class in terms of his size, his build, his 3-down skill set. He's an absolute monster. And I get it. Look, he's old. He's going to be 23 years old. Blah, blah, blah. I don't really care. Okay, I think he's going to be a good player. And even if you don't believe in Najee Harris, there's going to be plenty of people that do, and he's going to get an opportunity to demonstrate it. So his value bump is probably going to come sooner than most. And then Jamar Chase, the only wide receiver I have I call it a tier 1, but as you can see here, it's really tier 2 because Trevor Lawrence is the only tier 1 asset in this class. So Jamar Chase, I think, again, very independent of landing spot. I think he'll be pretty damn successful, and I think he's a lock for like top 15, top 20 draft capital, similar to CeeDee Lamb. So I'm comfortable taking him before I know where he lands because I think wherever he lands, he'll be a great player, and 2, he's going to get the draft capital and the opportunity to shine. Now, the next tier, this is where it's a little bit more fluid, right? So I have Trey Lance and Zach Wilson here with the next 2 running backs, which is Travis Etienne and Javonte Williams. And I think there's a very high opportunity for fluidity because as I mentioned before, if Trey Lance gets the draft capital, I am absolutely enamored of Trey Lance as a prospect. I think he is the Konami cheat code that I'm always talking about. He provides like that upside that no one else does, and the main thing is he's getting a ton of love from the film grinder community in terms of his arm talent, right? And when I say film grinder community, I'm talking about like people that I really trust and rely on and go to for film advice. So the risk is that he's inexperienced, but if he's getting that hype, he's getting that draft capital and gets to sit behind someone for a bit and develop, I think he has as high of an upside as any quarterback in this class. Now, does he have the same floor as Trevor Lawrence? Justin Fields? Probably not. But upside, from a fantasy perspective, not from a real life NFL perspective, from a fantasy perspective, absolutely. What he can do with his legs as a dual threat quarterback is incredible, and that's exactly what we're looking for. Zach Wilson, another person who had a meteoric rise, very Joe Burrow-esque, came from nowhere and just kind of balled the fuck out all season long. So, and he's another one that's getting a ton of love. So in Daniel Jeremiah's like latest mock draft, he had Zach Wilson and Trey Lance both of them going ahead of Justin Fields early in like the top 6 or top 8 or something like that. Top 6, I think it was. So yeah, those are 2 guys where right now I have that tier break there, but it could be very possible for them to just leap into the same group as Justin Fields if they get that top end draft capital. Because like I said, I love Trey Lance. I mean, if someone were to jump, it would be Trey Lance. I don't think he will because I think Justin Fields offers also very great dual threat ability and is probably a better passer. But if they do jump, that is the part where it's fluid. So right now, I have the tier cut off after Jamar Chase. I don't know where these guys will go. I don't think they're as secure from a draft capital perspective, but if they get it, they're going to be up there, and they're definitely going to separate themselves from the Travis Etienne's and Javonte Williams. And then so Travis Etienne, Javonte Williams, again, this goes to me really prioritizing running backs early on. The wide receiver group is deep, as you'll see as we go throughout this draft, and you'll get a lot more opportunities to fire. Like, I would much rather grab one of the top running backs towards the top and then fire like on more stud profile wide receivers in the late first or the early second, while other people are reaching, because you're going to get value there, right? Like, I don't even have guys like Devonta Smith in my top 12, as you see, right? He's going to go above. So you're going to get value, really good wide receivers in that early second range, very similar to how we got guys like T. Higgins, right? And Laviska Shenault and, Brandon Ayuk. All these guys, like, they were available in the late first, early second. I think we're going to see something very similar with the 2021 class, which is why I'm going to prioritize quarterbacks and running backs early. So that goes back to my point about drafting for need versus drafting BPA. I think positional value absolutely matters. Anyone that pretends like it doesn't, I think they're fooling themselves. Because at the end of the day, like, how is it harder to go and trade for wide receivers? Is it harder to go trade for quarterbacks and running backs in Superflex leagues? And it's always harder for me to do the latter. I mean, unless you're like a Justin Jefferson, obviously, who goes off and sets a rookie record. But like, I find, other wide receivers, like veteran wide receivers, like, are always available with wide receiver 2 upside. Guys like Robert Woods, guys like Keenan Allen, like all these guys will always be available for cheap. But young stud quarterbacks, young stud running backs, yeah, good fucking luck trying to acquire those, right? All right, so next up, we got a group of my next tier of wide receivers. So I got Rashad Bateman as my wide receiver 2. Big fan of him. I think the film community, I've gotten mixed up. I think everyone likes him. Some people think that he's more landing spot dependent than others. But overall, really good profile. From an analytical perspective, he's got the best analytical profile out of anyone. So he's got a better analytical profile than Jamar Chase, like hands down. Busted out, like broke out in a big way as a true freshman. Absolutely dominated as a sophomore. Made Tyler Johnson a damn near afterthought, right? And then continued on and continued to dominate. And his counting stats don't show it, but his market share receiving yards is still in the upper 40th percentile, like mid 40% for this year. So he just kept going up and up. And that's the age-adjusted trend of market share that you want to see. You break out as a true freshman, and then you just continue to go up as you stay. The longer you stay, the more you dominate. That's exactly what Rashad Bateman did. So I absolutely love him. Rondale Moore, he's small, so size is a concern. The reason why I moved him down past Rashad Bateman is because I'm not sure where he's going to go in the NFL draft, right? If he goes in the first round, a lot of my concerns are absolutely erased because nobody had a better breakout than Rondale Moore in this class. Like, as a true freshman, he absolutely freaking dominated. He won the Paul Hornung, was the most versatile and diverse player in the nation, returns punts, he rushes. You can use him like anywhere. He is incredible. And Ray GQ, friend of the show, obviously had Steve Smith. He was an early Rondale Smith truther, and I followed Rondale Moore because of Ray. He comped them to Steve Smith. Love that comp. They're both incredibly aggressive. Just because they're small does not mean they're not aggressive. They can both attack the ball relatively well. So that's a great tier. And then I have Kyle Pitts. And, people think that I'm really low on Kyle Pitts. Like, I'm not. Like, I think Kyle Pitts is an incredible, incredible prospect. One of the best we've seen in quite some time, right? Maybe over the last decade, maybe over 2 decades, depending on who you ask. Who knows? He's a fantastic player, right? But he's a tight end. And, like, personally, like, people think about it this way. They say, hey, if I draft a tight end early, look at TJ Hawkinson, look at Noah Fant. Their value either held or increased. And that's true, right? But that's not the way I think about it. I think about it in terms of the opportunity cost I lost by drafting that tight end, even though they increased value. And I was someone that went really heavy on TJ Hawkinson and tight end premiums. I was taking him in like the top 3, top 4, top 5, right? Because I thought he was that good, and all the film grinders telling me he was that good. I'm like, all right, well, based on point scoring differential, like based on point advantage of tight ends and how valuable they are, I'm going to take a shot here. But the mistake in thinking that way, in my opinion, is you give up on the opportunity cost of guys that you could have got. Like, think about the A.J. Browns, the DK Metcalfs of the world. That's who I passed on. The Miles Sanders, right? Those are the guys who I passed on. And none of, like, A.J. Brown, DK Metcalf, like Miles Sanders, like, none of these guys were, like, generational type prospect that everyone loved, right? They were viewed as, like, really good prospects with some problems and some holes and some landing spots or whatever you want to say. But look at the value they've experienced relative to a TJ Hawkinson. That's the comparison. It's the opportunity cost that you gave up to draft that tight end. And even though his value might go up a little bit, and his value might hold, or his value might like go up in 2 to 3 years, the amount of flips and trades and values that I could have gained within that time by landing and hitting, let's say like a Rondale Moore, Rashad Bateman, like Travis Etienne. Let's say some of these guys hit big, right? You're looking at a future second round, first round startup pick. And unless you're in a super flex tight end premium, even if you are in a super flex tight end premium, who are the tight ends that go in the first couple of rounds? It's Travis Kelce, George Kittle, Mark Andrews after he had proven and had a massive breakout rookie season, which we later found out was not the right move, right? These are the only guys that get up there, right? So you're really, really playing against the odds when you do that. And I understand how good Kyle Pitts is, but those are just not odds I'm willing to play on. I'd much rather play on a more frequent hit, someone like a running back or a quarterback like a Trey Lance, Zach Wilson. These guys who can gain value very rapidly, and even if I don't like them, I'll just flip them, and I can take those gains and acquire someone else. It's like compound returns, man. Think about your investment account, right? You're compounding like monthly returns. You make 10% every single month, versus like buying a stock that you think a piece of a house, for example, right? Like you invest in real estate and you just hold it. You can't sell it. You can't sell it for like years, right? And you might make that like 10, 15, 20%, right? But in the interim, someone that had invested in stocks or crypto, for example, you could have bought and flipped multiple times, right? And like use those gains to then acquire more assets down the road. So that's how I think about it. Like it's not just the opportunity cost of drafting a Kyle Pitts versus a Travis Etienne, Javonte Williams, or like a Rondale Moore, Rashad Bateman. It's the opportunity cost of me getting one of those guys, flipping them a year later, and then taking those assets. Maybe I flip them into like two more first, and now I have two more guys to play with down the line in the 2022 class or 2023 class or whatever. So that's the way I want you guys to think about tight ends, right? It's not that Kyle Pitts is not a fantastic prospect. Everyone can agree on that. It is the game theory behind drafting a tight end and us not knowing anything about tight ends. Like everyone is so bad at projecting tight ends. Everyone, I don't care who you are. We are not good as a group at projecting tight ends. It's why the first tight end taken in a class has really even finished as the top tight end the following season, right? So that's the risk with taking the tight end. Having said that, I still have him in my first round of Superflex drafts. I think that's saying something, and I have him in grouped with my tier 2 of wide receivers in Rashad Bateman, Rondale Moore, and Kyle Pitts. And if you want to take Kyle Pitts, this is an area where I said, hey, if you need tight end, this is a place where I'd be okay with you reaching and flipping within the tier. Take a Kyle Pitts over a Rondale Moore or Rashad Bateman if you have to. If you really want to swing on that tight end. And even in a non-tight end premium, I'm okay with it. I think non-tight end premium might be the only place that I'm going to land any Kyle Pitts, because in Superflex tight end premium, he's going to go where I have Justin Fields right now. He's going to go in that top part of the first round, right? That's where you're going to have to get him. Top 5, top 4, and I'm just not going to be willing to do that. I'm going to take a Najee Harris and one of the QBs over him like 9 times out of 10. So that's how I think about it there. The next tier is pretty thin. It's just 2 guys. And it's kind of amusing, it's kind of intriguing and probably surprising to a lot of you guys who follow me, knowing that I come from an analytics background. But I have kind of 2 contrarians here, right? Like De'Ami Brown, analytic darling, a huge breakout as a sophomore, as a true sophomore, continue that campaign and continue to ball out in his 3rd year as a junior. He is a speedster. He's a burner. I love him. Like analytical profile wise, he's fantastic. And from the film people I've spoken to, they think that he's pretty damn good too. So he kind of checks all the boxes there. Maybe BMI is a concern, but I'm not worried when he has all the other boxes checked, right? So, and then on the flip side, you have Jalen Waddle, not an analytic darling at all. And I tweeted a lot about Jalen Waddle and talking about him. And the thing I think that's interesting about him is, look, he technically didn't break out, but he was absolutely on track to break out this season in a big way. Like he had in the first 4 or 5 games that both him and Devonta Smith played, he was rocking I believe a 35% market share of receiving yards. So he was going to break out this year. And in fact, here I have the numbers here. So in the first 4 games, when both were healthy, Jalen Waddle 557 yards, Devonta Smith 483 yards. Jalen Waddle 35% of the market share of receiving yards, and Devonta Smith 30% of the market share of receiving yards, and both had a 33% market share of TDs, but I don't really look at that much. I mostly focus on yards. So he was absolutely going to break out, and he was going to break out in a more impressive fashion than Devonta Smith did last season. So if you really believe Devonta Smith is a first-round wide receiver for that smaller sample size, which I get it, it's only 4 games, but that's a significant part of the season. And for that part of the season, Jalen Waddle looked like the best player on Alabama. So, and this is one of those times where like I'm gonna take other stuff into context. I mean, as a true freshman, not as a true freshman, but as a freshman, he had like 17% market share of the yard. So as a freshman, he did more than Henry Ruggs ever did. So anyone comparing Jalen Waddle to Henry Ruggs, I think, is very off base. They are not at all the similar player from stylistically, just from me looking at them. They're not the same. Like Henry Ruggs has one thing. He has great speed, right? He has great top end speed. Jalen Waddle has equally good top end speed, but he is way more shifty and has way more acceleration and stop and go, right? So I think when put in the right system, that skill set is going to be quite valuable. I don't know how you're going to be able to guard someone like a Jalen Waddle when he is way more versatile than a Henry Ruggs, and also has a top speed and also can like really like jump up and leap and catch it with the best of them. So, and obviously like I think probably one of the best punt returners in college football. So I love that versatility part about him as well. I think he can get used all over the field as a weapon. So love that about Jalen Waddle. So I'm going to be probably higher on Jalen Waddle than any or most of my analytical compatriots because I am making that contextual adjustment for him. So, and you know, I'm still not taking him in the first round. I don't know if I'll land him here. Like this is, I have him at 2.01. I might have to reach for him in a couple spots to just grab him and balance out with Dyami Brown. But I really like Jalen Waddle. I've liked what I've seen from him. I think he's a completely different player from Henry Ruggs, and I think if anyone breaks a mold, it's going to be him. So that's the first round plus the first one of the second round. I didn't want to break it in between a tier, but you'll see I have 1, 2, 3, 4, like 5 tiers, right? In that one round. So understanding where the drop-offs are huge. Like Trevor Lawrence, first round starter pick. Most of these guys probably looking at like a third or fourth round starter pick at the earliest, right? And then this yellow group, depending on where Trey Lance and Zach Wilson go, they might be like a fourth round, third round startup pick if they get high draft capital. So if that happens, I'll have to shift that tier a little bit. But these are in like the fourth round, fifth round startup picks, right? And then the Rashad Bateman, Rondale Morris, Kyle Pitts. I think this is where you're looking at like the 6 to 8, right? Maybe 7 or 8, round 6 to round 8. Probably round 7, round 8, I would bet, is where you would land some of these guys, right? And then Dyami Brown, Jalen Waddle would be like the later single digits. So to early double digits, right? That's where, you got like guys like Henry Ruggs and stuff last year. So it's really important to understand these tiers because moving from a Trevor Lawrence down to a Trey Lance is 3 to 4 rounds of startup value, right? So act accordingly when you're trading down. Like I would need a future first, maybe more to actually make that move, right? And I think you should treat it the same way. And then similarly, if you're going from like a Travis Etienne to like a Kyle Pitts or a Dyami Brown, right? That's like another 4 or 5 moves of rounds in the draft. So don't just take like a second round pick to move from late first to late first because you think that's what it is. Really, really understand the tiers and set your tiers up that way to see where you're comfortable like taking those drop offs. All right. So next, let's move on to the second round. All right. So we already had 2.01. That was Jalen Waddle. He went off. But here, I have a pretty big tier, right? I have a group of wide receivers who I'd like. They all have question marks for me personally. Seth Williams. Seth Williams moved down a little bit for me because I've been getting a lot of feedback from the film community, film guys I trust that just aren't really in on him, and I'm concerned about draft capital, right? So that's the issue here is I don't know if he's going to get second round draft capital, which before this, I thought for sure he would get that, right? But based on a lot of the guys I'm seeing, a lot of mocks from like the main media heads, which what I pay attention to, and a lot of the film grinders, they say he's out like a ton of weaknesses, right? He's not physical at the line of scrimmage. He gets beat by physical coverage and physical corners. And when you're big and strong, that's all you're going to get in the NFL is physical press coverage. So if you can't beat it in college, it's going to be a problem in the NFL. But most importantly, I'm not sure where he's going to go draft capital wise. So that's why I'm concerned about Seth Williams. If he falls like day 3, right, a round 4 pick, I'm going to be very concerned. You're going to have to move him down. And right now, I feel like this is generous. This is like taking on that risk and assuming he's going to get the draft capital. If he gets the draft capital, I'll be a lot more comfortable. But until then, this is a little bit worrisome for me. So Terrace Marshall, someone that jumped up. A big fan of Terrace Marshall. He broke out again in a big way in his junior year. And, last year was playing behind Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson, who is now the rookie of the year candidate and NFL rookie receiving yards leader. So as soon as they left, even though the team took a freaking dump, Terrace Marshall was an absolute monster for the first part of the year when he was healthy. He was like, he was leading college football in like market share of receiving yards and dominator. So that was incredible. So and it seems like the film community plus the NFL draft community is very high on him as well. So I feel more protected in him as an asset because I think he's going to get draft capital, probably somewhere in that day 2 range. And then Devonta Smith, people think I hate him. I don't hate him. It's just that he has more red flags than some of the other guys I had before. But draft capital will be there, so he's protected. So you cannot ignore the fact that draft capital will be there. He will get the opportunity, and it's not like he stinks. He's still a really good player. I just tend to prefer others ahead of him. But because I have Devonta Smith ranked here, you probably can guess that I'm not going to land him anywhere. Most people have him as a wide receiver 2, or someone in your league will be a film grinder that absolutely loves Devonta Smith and have him ranked as wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2. And, those people will get him. And I'm fine missing on him if I do. But this is where I have him. And then Amon-Ra St. Brown, again, similarly, like a good wide receiver prospect with some question marks. He didn't really ever apex and dominate the way that you want to see alphas dominate. Like he never even hit the heights that Terrace Marshall or Seth Williams even hit. But he has been consistently good, and he has been good and broke out as a freshman. Ever since he was a true freshman as an 18-year-old. So that's always going to carry with some weight and be impressive. Mac Jones is like the last quarterback of all the big folks. And, as you can see, I have him much lower than everyone else because I just don't want to invest in non-Konami quarterbacks. So unless the only time I'll do it is if I think they're like a freaking incredible generational prospect that can produce 40 to 50 touchdowns like every season, like a Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers. And there just aren't any of those outside of Trevor Lawrence in this class. And Trevor Lawrence also happens to have Konami code. So I'm just not going to invest in Mac Jones because even if you hit on him as a quarterback, I just don't think that the return is going to be there. People are wising up to the Konami code, and people realize it's going to be a necessity more so than a luxury going forward. So, I'm just not that interested in quarterbacks that are non-Konami, and also one-hit wonders, which is what he is. And he had an incredible season as well. Arguably better than Tua's season, even. And a lot of people might make the case that he's better than Tua or the same as Tua. And that might be the case. But even going back, I probably would not have Tua ranked as high as I did because he does not offer that Konami upside as much. But Tua still offers some. Mac Jones offers nothing. Tua still produces some points on the ground. Mac Jones will not produce points on the ground. So unless I'm not interested in statue quarterbacks. All right. The next group, you'll see now, it's been a while since I've mentioned the running back position, right? So this is the first time I'm going to get into it again. And it's led by Kenneth Gainwell. I think he is by far and away the better running back of this group. And he leads the pack. And the only concern there is size, right? We don't know if he's going to be a workhorse. He's probably not going to be a workhorse, but he could be someone that lands in a spot. If he lands in a good spot with a receiving role open, he could eventually work into a committee where he splits groundwork and then wins majority of the passing work. And that's the dream scenario for someone like Kenneth Gainwell, but he's a fantastic player. I could see if he gets draft capital, if he goes day 2, right? If he goes in the second round, I could absolutely see him leaping into that tier above, sitting with the Devonta Smith and Seth Williams, right? I could absolutely see that. But if he goes day 3, this is probably where it'll shake out. I'm not going to take running backs. This is why, I set my tiers up this way because I'm just probably not going to land the third tier of running backs outside of the top 3. That's just probably not going to happen. And I prefer it that way because I have this big bucket of wide receivers here. This is why I land a lot of wide receivers in the second because I always set up my drafts this way, especially in classes like this where the wide receiver class is incredibly, incredibly deep. And then I have Elijah Moore, who checks all the boxes from an analytical perspective. He's a little bit on the smaller side, similar to Rondale Moore. But, monster breakouts in the high dominator range. And, from a film perspective, I haven't dug in too deep, but he seems to have the goods. But we'll see where draft capital lands for him. I'm just not clear on him on draft capital, which is why I kind of have him in this bucket. Maybe it goes day 2, late day 2 in round 3. That'll be pretty exciting. If he goes early day 2 in round 2, that would probably bump him up a little bit more. I'm just unsure about where he's going to go, so that's why I have him here for now. But absolutely great prospect from an analytical lens. And then the last bucket to round out the second round here, we got Tylan Wallace, who I was a big fan of last season. I wish he kind of declared, but he didn't because he got hurt, so wanted to go back. And the good thing is when he did go back, he absolutely dominated. So kind of in the same vein as a Denzel Mims, right? We were concerned about him going back for senior year, but it was because he got hurt his junior year and then went back his senior year. He absolutely crushed it. So that's what you want to see. If they do go back, you do want to see them crush and absolutely continue on that age-adjusted trajectory and he did that. So, I'm going to have him in the second round. But again, question marks here regarding draft capital. Like, if you didn't early declare, that means the NFL at some point told you, like, hey, like, you're not good enough to get early draft capital. So we'll kind of see where he goes. Like, I don't want to fall for a scenario where, like, I fall in love with, like, these Big 12, like, smaller programs like Oklahoma State, and then the NFL's like, nah, we're not that interested. So the risk is there for sure. And then we got Jamar Jefferson, who I said was an interesting prospect at running back. He kind of had a monster freshman season, then got hurt his sophomore year, and then came back this year and, looked a lot like his old self. So an interesting later dart throw here. And then Trey Sermon. Trey Sermon's interesting, right? Because he's kind of been in a committee, never really dominated at anything. And then when he transferred to Ohio State, I know that everyone was like pretty psyched. A lot of film people that I know are pretty psyched about him getting there. And he still didn't really show too much until like down the stretch. So you saw a flash of what he could do, but you don't know what you're going to get from that in the NFL. Like, do teams even view him as a workhorse running back? Probably not. Going to be in a committee, like depending on where he goes. Like, I'm guessing like somewhere late day 2, early day 3 is where he'll land. But, just like that, like I said, the running backs outside of the top group is not that interesting. Like, all of them have like major holes or major red flags that you're concerned about. So I'm going to be concerned. And Ramondre Stevenson, look forward to like Noah putting out a cut up, because he's going to do a film session breakdown for someone like him, I believe, soon. So be on the lookout for that. But, from a number perspective, he's pretty good. He's got the size, assuming he's got the athleticism, and he's got the receiving chops. So he's a really intriguing prospect, and a lot of the film people that I've talked to kind of like him as well. So if he gets that draft capital, it's going to be really interesting between him and Kenneth Gainwell, right? Kenneth Gainwell is like that smaller, elusive receiving back. Ramondre Stevenson's more like that workhorse build, like huge monster running back. So they're kind of like the antithesis of each other, but draft capital will dictate a lot for running backs in this group. But overall strategy wise, I think you got to go for running backs early and then kind of let the rest take care of itself. So quick recap here. I'll go back to the first round real quick. Tier 1, Trevor Lawrence. Tier 2, Justin Fields, Najee Harris, Jamar Chase. Tier break. And then Tier 3, Trey Lance, Zach Wilson, Travis Etienne, Javonte Williams. Noting that Trey Lance and Zach Wilson can easily leap into that Tier 2 tier depending on where they land in the draft. And then Tier 4 is group of wide receivers, and I'll call them all wide receivers. Kyle Pitts is basically a wide receiver. Rashad Bateman, Rondale Moore, and Kyle Pitts. Take whoever you like in that. I don't really care. And then to close out the first round and open up the second round, you have a tier of 2 guys, which is De'Ami Brown and Jalen Waddle. So that's the first round. And then second round, you have a big group of wide receivers backed up by Mac Jones here. We got Terrace Marshall, Devonta Smith, Seth Williams, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Mac Jones. And then tier break, Kenneth Gainwell, Elijah Moore, Ramondre Stevenson. And then tier break, Tylan Wallace, Jamar Jefferson, Trey Sermon. So that rounds up the first 2 rounds of the Superflex draft. This is not a mock. This is just how I think about it, how I have my rankings and tiers done. I'm still working on building the rest of my rankings. Full Dynasty, Cornerstone, which is like the combined 2020, 2021 class, potentially 2019. I haven't decided how I want to do that yet. Probably just the 2020 and 2021, to be honest with you. And then the positional rankings, the full rankings, and everything by tier. I'm working on that right now. Hopefully I'll have that. I'll have that in the next couple of months or so. It takes me a long time to do this stuff. It's not just like as easy as like moving shit up and down. A lot of people put out just ranks like willy-nilly. I put up a ton of thought into it, and because I'm trying to like really project values and where I think players will go, because as you know, this is Stonks Watch, Market Watch Mondays. It takes some time to do that. So stick with me. I'll kind of release those. I'll release the combined class wide receiver rankings, the combined class tight end rankings. Those will still be to come. But more importantly, man, stay tuned for the guests that are coming on. We had our first guest, Ray GQ. That episode blew up, was on fire. Thanks to him for coming on. But I got a great cast of guests coming on, and you guys will not want to miss it. I'm trying to keep it to like 1 guest per month, because I don't want the show to just become a bunch of guests coming on talking, because I still want to like talk about and teach the strategy that I set out to do when I created this show. But there's going to be some incredible guests, and just know that they're aligned with the mantra of the show, right? Like very strategy, very well thought out, and they're going to teach us something. They're going to teach me something when I bring them on, and they're going to teach you guys something as well. Some of you guys mentioned DF Bean Counter. So Drew, a good friend of mine on Twitter, he's one of those guests. So I'll be having him on next month. So he'll be one of those guys. And then, stay tuned, because I got really big names coming up. should I announce it? Maybe I'll just announce it on here so you guys know. But I'm going to have JJ Zachariason at late round QB, the true godfather of analytics, the one who started one of my favorite analysts. One of the only podcasts I still listen to every single week is JJ's late round QB podcast. And then Graham Barfield, the creator of Yards Created, the running back guru. Like I take yards created as gospel, as a major input into my rankings. So that's why my rankings for running backs are never even final until Graham does his work, because he's a freaking wizard when it comes to running backs. And there's really nothing out there that's more correlated with running back success than his yards created model. So Graham Barfield secured him. He'll be coming on in April once he finishes yards created to talk the new rookie running back class. JJ will be coming on in March. So yeah, man, it's gonna be a low schedule. And then I also gonna have one of my favorite film grinders in all the Twitterverse, Jetpack Galileo from the FF Astronauts. Haven't settled a date yet, but he's agreed to come on the show, so we'll kind of figure that out. Probably sometime in April or before the draft is when he finishes his film. And I want to bring on, like you can see through these guests, I want to bring on a good mix of analytics and film, because I respect both avenues of analysis. And to be honest with you, like I prefer talking to the film guys, because like they will provide me insights that I don't even understand or think of. So Jetpack Galileo, one of the best film evaluators out there, I'm going to have him on the show as well. So like I said, man, Murderer's Row of MVP caliber Hall of Fame guests coming on this show in the offseason. We are going to give you the best content possible on Bunkbed Breakdowns, and part of that is bringing on the best guests. And I truly feel like I've gathered, and thankfully these people have agreed to come on this tiny little show of mine to talk shop. So very generous of them and their time. But make sure you be on the lookout for that. It's going to be exciting. I'll have like the exact dates and the exact schedules out shortly as well, so you guys know exactly when to expect them. But those are not episodes you're going to miss. Let me take down this ranking because it's not here anymore. But yeah, those are not episodes you're going to want to miss. If you guys enjoyed the Ray GQ episode, you're going to enjoy these ones. If you haven't seen the Ray GQ episode, I highly recommend you go back and watch it. We talked rookies, we talked wide receivers, we talked Devies, we talked race process. It was an awesome episode, and I'm looking forward to doing more of these guest shows with the phenomenal guests that I have lined up this offseason. So if you like the episode, if you enjoyed, if you learned something, hit the subscribe button, give us a thumbs up. It helps more than you know. If you didn't like it, if you didn't enjoy it, comment below. Tell me what you didn't like. Tell me what you want to change, and I will try and read it, get to you, and adjust. I mean, trust me, I do read the comments, right? Like now you guys know my volume is up. I've been tweaking it up every single episode, every single comment I see to try and get that volume up. Someone commented on like bad video quality. Hopefully, as you've seen, the video quality has gone up substantially in the last episode and this episode because we're using a new software. Thanks to Nick, the Godfather, for supplying us with that. But yeah, man, I really do read all the comments and try and process them as much as I can. So yeah, if you like, thumbs up, record, and then follow me on Mike Me Up on Twitter.com. I try and engage with whoever I can. You want to like get in a battle, get in a debate, have at it. Feel free to DM me. I try and answer trade questions and trade advice and all that stuff in my DMs as well. So make sure you guys follow me on there if you want to engage. All right, that's all we got for you this week. See you all next week on another episode of Market Watch Mondays. Peace.